Hello viewers, here is an Air King fan. This is the model number 9530. And here's the informations. This is equivalent to the Lasco Whirlwind fan that was made about 2 decades ago. It's kind of interesting how so many of the Lasco products from the 90s and the very early 2000s have come back under the Air King name, and some of them were sold for a very long time. This fan was sold up until, I want to say, last year. I noticed this year the price started to skyrocket on Amazon and some other places, so that probably means it's discontinued. There was still one retailer that has them in stock, and they still have it at a reasonable price. I bought 5 of them last week because I think once they're gone, they're gone. So anyways, I've become very fond of these recently. They move quite a bit of air, very quiet for the amount of air moved, and it's a pretty versatile fan. It fits nicely on the windowsill. You could do a wall mount if you wanted to. And it's just overall a pretty good product. It's hard to find a really good fan nowadays, and I think this is one of the very few that was left. The only thing that's completely ridiculous about this fan is this cord wrap. It is way too small and just has absolutely no chance of ever holding the entirety of the cord. Okay, so we're not even halfway through the cord and it's full. So that's just, I don't get that. But other than that, it's a great fan. So in this video, we're going to take it apart. We're going to take a look at the insides, take a look at the motor, take a look at the blade, you know, see how good of a quality it is, how good the design is. And I'm not going to clean it in this video because it's a new fan, it doesn't need to be clean. But if you had a dirty one, this would be the procedure to follow to take it apart for cleaning. And I'm going to oil it in this video because, as is the case with many fans today, it ships with an inadequate amount of lubrication, and that will cause the bearings to fail very prematurely. So I'm going to turn it on here, and it runs fine. I'm going to turn it off, and you're going to see that it stops pretty quickly, and it shouldn't do that. It should be going for a lot longer than that. So let's begin. Now, I've never taken one of these apart, so this will be a learning experience for me as well. It does not seem very obvious how this comes apart. I don't see any screws. I don't see any screws anywhere. It looks like we're going to have some tabs. Okay, we got a tab there, and then we have a tab over here, and I'm thinking if we press those tabs in, that may release the front guard. Wow, that was super easy. Okay, so if you want to clean it, most people aren't going to go further than this. Got the guard off real easy, got access to the blades, access to the rear guard, obviously access to the front guard. Nice, okay. And then we have the blade. I'm going to take the blade off because we're going to clean it, or we're going to oil the motor, so the blade has to come off for that. And I like that there is a bolt here. This is correct. A lot of fans nowadays use a single-use locking mechanism on there. No good. This has a bolt. This is correct, and this is designed to be removed and serviced. Now, let's see here. A thin socket would probably be better, but this wrench will work. And that wasn't overly tight either. That was a very reasonable tightness. Now the blade should just come right off, and it did. Here's the blade. Pretty decent looking blade. It's got a lot of pitch to it. It's not super sturdy, but it's not really flimsy either. It certainly isn't going to fold under resistance when it's running from the air. Good blade. Okay, now let's see what we have here for the motor. That's not what I was expecting at all. I was expecting to see one of those typical kind of Lasco style motors. This looks more like a Raider motor. This looks like the same kind of motors that a lot of the Holmes products used to use in the 90s, 2000s. I'm not sure that this is made by Raider, but it could be. I'm not sure. Okay, that's the other thing I forgot about these fans. That tilt adjustment is horrific. But that's kind of a set and forget thing. That's not something that you use regularly. Alright, so now what I want to do is I'm going to take this screw out up here at the top in order to get the switch off. I think that'll release the switch. And it looks like that's a good bit, so we'll use this one. And I think it's going to release something on the back. Okay, that's not quite ready to come off yet. So let's remove some other screws first. Let's take off these 3 screws on the outside of the motor. Oh my gosh, that's brilliant. That is absolutely brilliant. This is the easiest fan to clean I've ever serviced. Because you know why at this point? These are the 3 items that really get dusty. It's all plastic. That just goes right in the dishwasher. Or spray with the garden hose or something. This is so well designed. That's incredible. I had no idea it was going to be this easy. Okay, so cleaning, 10 out of 10. Super easy. Doesn't get any better than that. Let's see how easily the motor is serviced. Now, we have what could be a minor complication here. We have this little thing on the shaft to align the blade to. I guess I'll just remove the motor from this. I can't believe how easily that comes apart. That's incredible. I've really never seen a design quite like this before. Okay, so we have a capacitor here, switch there, that all can stay in place. Now this motor is open on the back, and so if you're not really inclined to go any further than this, but you can't get the motor to run, or it's running real slow, or it's squeaking or whatever, you could just put a couple drops of oil in there, put a couple drops of oil in there, put it back together. That would work. It's not the best thing to do, but it would work. I'm going to go further. I'm going to split this motor open to give it oil correctly and soak the wicks in there so that it lasts longer. As you can see here, this is pretty stiff. It really doesn't coast for very long at all, so it definitely did not get enough oil in the factory, which is bothering me because other than that, it seems like they got this fan pretty much totally correct. Alright, so I'm going to take off these 4 screws around the outside of the motor. They're holding it together. Don't think this is the... Oh, I guess it is still the correct size bit. These screws are all different sizes, but at least the heads are uniform. Okay, now what I have to do in order to split this motor apart is I have to tap out this little thing here on the shaft. So I'm going to put that up onto a screwdriver like that, and I have a little tool here that'll stick right on the top of there. Actually, that may not, it's too big, because if it goes in there it'll just make it wider. We need something else here. Let's try a big common, I guess. And then I'm going to just slowly tap this. Normally I would just tap the hammer right on there, but it's so close I can't get a good angle on it. I'll try it anyways, though. Maybe I can do it. It's coming, it's just taking its time. Okay. Let's see if I can just pull that out now. Nope. Okay, so this is where I'm going to have to get that smaller, more pointy thing out and tap it through the rest of the way with that. Okay, it's going to have to get pulled out at this point because I can't tap it any further. There we go. That put up a good fight, but it did eventually come out. Now, with that removed, and because the shaft is clean and I didn't nick it up at all, I should be able to just slide the bearing right off this front part of the motor here. Although, in this case, what's happening is the stator is sticking to the rear cover. Now this is very dangerous to do this, what I'm doing with the screwdriver, because if you make one mistake and you slip, you'll cut the windings. So be very cautious if you do this. And I'm just trying to very gently pry the front cover away from the stator. There we go. It just broke free. Okay, so now I'm going to just pull this right out, and that came off, and this seems to be hanging up on something there. I'm not sure what it's hanging on. Okay, so in that case we're going to have to file it down. So I'm going to undo what I just did and stick this back together. And I just got to get it to run. And I'm going to take a filing stick here and just kind of sand this down a bit. There's something here that's keeping it from coming off. Okay. You never want to just force that off because you'll scrape the inside of the bearing surface and cause a damage. Okay, so now that the motor is opened up, what we're going to do is we're going to add some lubrication. Now, curiously enough, these look wet to me inside there. I don't know if you'll be able to see this on the camera or not, but there is a, let me get the light out because I want to show this, because this is important. There is a wick type material in there. I can't tell if this is getting a good angle or not. There we go, you kind of can see it now. The previous screen is inverted, which is why I'm having a very difficult time getting this to be in the frame. So right outside the surface of the bearing, you can kind of see it's a little bit shiny in there. There's a cloth type material. It's not really a cloth, but it's a wicking substance that will hold oil, and it looks like it's wet, so that means there's oil on it, and it seems to be kind of wet all the way around. So interestingly enough, it does appear as though it has lubrication in there. I don't know if it's just not enough, or maybe the motor wasn't aligned correctly, but that's definitely promising that there's oil in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a little bit more. Okay, just threw that on the floor. That wasn't too good. There's two kinds of oils that we can use here. You can use the 3-in-1 in the blue can. Not this one in the black can. This is not for Fians. This one is for Fians. It says it right on the box. Fians. Or you can use this oil. This is zooming spout oil. And this is specifically for the electric motors, which of course is what's within the Fian. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some oil right in here on the outside of the bearing, in between the bearing and the housing there. Just a drop or two, because there already appears to be some oil in there. If this was dry, I'd go 5 or so drops in there, but I don't think that's necessary in this situation. Even that might have been a bit too much. Maybe I'll just put 1 drop in here. Okay. And now that that's like that, so make sure this isn't going to spill out. That was a bit too much. I'm going to absorb a little bit of that oil out of there. You don't want it to be like flooded in there. It should just be enough to dampen the material. Okay. So there's that. There's enough oil in there now. I guess there kind of was, but anyways. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a drop of oil on this shaft, directly onto the shaft here. And I'm going to slide this back into the motor. Okay, and then I'm going to do the same thing on the front. I'm going to put a little bit of oil on here, just a trace amount, and I'm going to slide this back on. It's pretty good quality looking motor. I think that's a bronze bearing in there. And the windings are nice. It's a decent size too, not bad. And you want to be very careful inserting this to not nick any of the windings at all. It needs to go straight on. Not any kind of angles or nothing like that. Okay, and then it'll just close back up. And we'll put these screws on. You want to try to make the torque on them very even. They don't have to be very tight at all, just even. And this screwdriver isn't very powerful, so I'm going to just torque it all the way to the ability of the screwdriver. I'm going to put all of them in first, and then I'll tighten them down. Okay. Now, if you didn't want to do that, but you still needed to oil it, what you could do is you could just put a drop of oil in there, put a drop of oil in there, and that would lubricate the motor, but it may not last more than a couple of months. The oil really needs to get on that material in there, because if you just put it in through there, it gets on the surface of the bearing, but when it dries out, it dries out. If it's on that material inside there, it'll keep feeding through into the bearing. Now, upon reassembly, it could be very, very stiff. It's even stiffer than it was before. That's normal. What we need to do is take a screwdriver and just strike the shaft a couple times. And it'll free right up. Now, with that additional oil in there, it is spinning a bit more freely. So I think that was needed. And just for demonstrative purposes, if you didn't want to take it apart, this is what you would do. Just put a drop of oil on here and let it slip down in there. And then I like to wipe away the excess so it doesn't come out and get on the blade and then start flinging everywhere. And we'll do the same thing on the back. Just put a drop in there. And move the shaft in and out. Spin it a couple times to work the oil in. And then we'll wipe off the excess. Okay, so that's that. Now we're ready to tap that thing back in, this alignment thing. And this may be a little bit challenging because it fits in there very tight and it's going to be hard to align it correctly to get it to go in. I don't want to go very far with this screwdriver thing. Not a screwdriver, this pointing thing, but I'm going to try to use this just to get it started, and then I'll go with the hammer for the rest of it. Okay. I think that's in there enough that I can just hammer it in now. Because it's so close to the motor, I'm having a hard time getting a good angle on it with the hammer. Okay, so that's back on. Now that process may have messed up the bearing alignment a bit, so I'm going to strike the shaft a couple more times just to make sure that it's in line. And it's spinning very freely now, much freer than it was before. So I'm content with that. So now let's reassemble it. Okay, so that lines up in there like that with those 4 screws. And these screws are only threading into plastic, so I wouldn't put these very tight at all. Okay. Now let's get the rest of the fan back. I can't believe how easy this would be to clean. That's incredible. I haven't seen a fan like this, even a vintage one designed quite like this. Okay, that lines up pretty easily. Get the screws in. If this was in the frame, this goes in here like this. Kind of only sits in there one way, so it's very easy to line it up. I would not put these screws very tight either, because these also were going into plastic. Okay, we got another screw up on the top. And before I put that in all the way, I'm going to make sure these old tabs come through. And it's not, because looks like this part here at the top has to be pushed down into there like that. Now it's in place. The tabs came through and locked. Top popped out again. There we go. Let's get that back in there. Okay. Now the blade can go back on. Those 2 notches there sit in, or this sits in those 2 notches, so that has to be lined up. And you can see now it's spinning a lot more freely than it was before. A lot more freely. Yeah, the lock washer goes on first, then the nut, and the nut is reverse thread, so you're going to turn the nut to the left to tighten it. Does not have to go very tight at all, just snug. Much, much better than it was before. Now the bearings are happy. Okay, let's plug this in and give it a test before we reassemble it, just to make sure everything is working. Appears to be working. And as is the case with many of these fans, if you don't care about having the front guard on, it moves a lot more air. And it's probably quieter too. Yeah, although this grill isn't too bad. Some of these grills really restrict a lot of air. This one doesn't seem too bad. But it's working. And those bearings are coasting nicely now. Alright, let's put this back on. I think there's 4 clips. There's 2 at the bottom as well. And that went on just as easily as it came off, if not easier. This is really powerful. And it's not that loud. There's the medium. And finally the low. Yeah, this is a great fan. It really is. Relatively balanced too, which is kind of odd for these air clean fans. A lot of them not balanced correctly. But anyways, there's the cleaning and oiling of the Air King fan, whatever the model number was, I forgot. Super easy to clean. By far this is the easiest fan I've worked on to clean, because all you gotta do is take those couple of screws out. The motor to switch all the electronics is completely separated from both the guards, and so you can just wash the guards. It's so easy. Excellent design.